gentlemen, comrades and friends, well-wishers of the People Progressive Party Civic. In fact, all Guyanese. I have decided to begin this program, or to launch this program, given the impending regional and general elections that are going to take place in our country. Most people expect these elections to be held in the next 3 months. A further delay in the elections in Guyana would be a disservice to the judgment made by the Caribbean Court of Justice in respect to the matters that they recently adjudicated on. One being the tenure of the GCOM chairman, Mr. Patterson, and secondly, the validity of the no confidence motion in the National Assembly. Almost 6 months have passed since these developments took place. The government, APNU, AFC, have consistently tried their utmost to delay the triggering of the constitutional requirements that flow from the no confidence motion. In the meantime, Guyanese have been politically restless. They have been clamoring for seeing the back of this government. And they have been doing so quite justifiably so. And I say so not in relation only to supporters of the PPPC. I'm speaking about Guyanese across the political divide. Everywhere I go in Guyana, and I've been doing so quite recently, people have been complaining that, sir, money is not circulating. Life is increasingly difficult. You go to the sugar estates, many families are at their wits' end, do not know how to continue their livelihoods or how to eke out a living from the savings that they've accumulated over the years. Little is left for them to survive on. In the interior areas, the Amerindian people continue to experience enormous sufferings, not to speak about those communities in the riverine areas. I recently traveled abroad and heard the cries of many Guyanese who are also joining with their brothers and sisters in Guyana, clamoring for change. What is most unfortunate with our country is that every time elections comes around, the PNC, before now the APNU AFC coalition, continues to be bent on wreaking havoc in our country and to try their utmost to derail the democratic electoral process. The PPP has been in government, PPPC has been in government for 23 years. And at every stage of the elections that were held during that period, they tried to disrupt the process, even while they were in opposition. Now they're in the government, they are on the same path. We're hearing all kinds of unfortunate and unnecessary statements and comments from ministers of government, including the Prime Minister himself, who spoke about putting on his battle gear and ready for a war, which is linked to what the Minister of Finance said, that war break or war declare. This kind of language at an elections time is most unfortunate and in fact unacceptable. Because if you listen to the opposition leader in his press conferences, it is rare that you would hear comments of that nature emanating from those press conferences. And so what you have is a clear division of rhetoric that is unhelpful to a peaceful and democratic electoral process compared to language that is simply calling for the government to uphold the Constitution, secondly, to uphold the judgments of the Caribbean Court of Justice and to proceed in a consultative way, that is, in keeping with consultative democracy and the wishes of the broad masses of the Guyanese people for the holding of a free and fair elections. Now we have just crossed one hurdle, which is the decisions of the CCJ. The CCJ on Monday will hear arguments from all the contending parties in respect to the rulings or the judgments they have made and the consequences that will flow from those judgments. We are waiting on this other process to be completed. In the meantime, political parties, to a large extent, in a limited way perhaps, have begun their subtle campaigns. For the PPPC, I believe, and this is just my personal opinion, they have not, in a forward way, commenced a elections campaign. Their focus now is on exposing the corruption of the APNU-AFC, trying to track all the misdemeanors that they're attempting to frustrate the electoral process, and to keep the government on its toes in respect to upholding the Constitution of the Republic of Guyana and the judgments of the CCJ. Those are the immediate tasks. The next hurdle will come in respect to the chairman of GCOM. The opposition leader has already expressed his view and the view of the party that the chairmanship of Mr. Patterson is tenuous and is untenable. In general, the view is that he has to go. The consequences that will flow from that are not unimaginable. We have been through this before. In 1992, the then chairman of the Elections Commission, Mr. Harold Bollers, had to go under pressure by the Carter Center, the diplomatic community, political parties, and non-governmental organizations, including religious bodies. It was only under that kind of pressure that Mr. Hoyt called for the resignation of Mr. Harold Bollers. The chairmanship of GCOM is a critical position because, as we all know, there are 7 members of the commission, 3 from the government and 3 from the opposition. At this point in time, I would like to pay tribute to the commissioners representing the opposition at GCOM. They have been doing a fantastic job in keeping GCOM on its toes. And so with 7 members on the commission, 3 from the opposition, 3 from the government, and a chairman that has so far indicated where his sympathies lie, it is a question of 4 against 3, or 3 against 4. And this chairman has consistently demonstrated that he's supportive of the government side. What we need is an impartial, fair, and even-handed chairman. That is what we want in this country. And that is what we fought for and we won in 1992. There's also the question of the machinery of GCOM, which the political parties will have to deal with at the appropriate point in time. Then there's also the question of the voters list. Those of you who have heard the views of the People's Progressive Party through the leader of the opposition would have heard a clear exposition on the question of the voters list. That all Mr. Granger, the president of this country and leader of the APNU, is doing is seeking to extend his term in office beyond what the Constitution requires following the no confidence motion. He's speaking about the flawed voters list, that the list is corrupted, when in fact This is the very list that was used for the recent local government elections, and which up to December last year was valid, and in fact came to an end in April 30th of this year. So the question is whether this list could be cleaned up. Experience has shown that any voters list could be cleaned up through the process of claims and objections. And we've been through that process before. In 1992, the voters list was cleaned up with the cooperation of all the interested parties. We therefore have to work assiduously to ensure that the list that is currently with GCOM, based on the National Register of Registrants and on the basis of the consistent cycle of registrations, that we have a credible, clean, and acceptable list to all the parties. That's another hurdle we will have to jump as we proceed towards Elections Day. So the big one now is, will the elections be free and fair? We will talk more about that as time goes by. But for now, the main question is the consequences of the judgments made by the distinguished jurors at the Caribbean Court of Justice. Now at this point in time, I'd like to pay homage and extend my warmest and deepest congratulations to all our legal experts. First of all, to Mr. Anil Nandalal and his team, to Mr. Kamal Ramkaran, to Mr. Christopher Ram, and all the others, lawyers, attorneys at law, who represented the people of Guyana, not just their own constituents, but the people of Guyana at the Caribbean Court of Justice. They did a fantastic job. They did a remarkable job. And for them, we are eternally grateful. Let us therefore not rest on our laurels. Let us therefore not be complacent. Let us therefore not repeat what was said in previous elections, that we don't win already. Let us be vigilant. Let us be alert. We in the PPP, as individuals, as well as all parties, must work together at this point in time to ensure that we have a free and fair elections. When the campaign, when the parliament is dissolved and the date for elections are announced, then we will launch out into our respective campaign. But in the meantime, let us all put our shoulders to the wheel as Democrats in order to ensure that this process that we're going through at this point in time is free, fair, transparent, and acceptable to the entire Guyanese people. And that the APNU AFC, notwithstanding all the tricks, notwithstanding all the maneuvers that they would attempt, that we are keeping a watchful eye on the process to ensure that the process is transparent, that the Guyanese people are satisfied, and that we arrive at the stage of the holding of a free and fair elections that is totally free and fair and acceptable to each and every Guyanese man, woman, youth, and teenager. Thank you. My friends, as I said at the beginning of this program, it is launched at a critical time in the history of our country. And this is my contribution to the general debate and discussion that is taking place on all the issues that are being debated in the media and throughout the country, at every nook and cranny. I intend to continue with this discussion, and I call it a discussion because it's not only a question of views, it's a reflection of a discussion that is taking place in our country. I intend to continue with this discussion on a weekly basis. And I encourage you to make your comments, to join with me, and to participate fully in this discussion while you're participating in discussions taking place at other fora. So let us be at one as Guyanese, whether it's in our country or in the diaspora, to ensure that we have as broad and as wide a discussion as possible, as active a discussion as possible, as innovative a discussion as possible. We need ideas, we need contributions. And as I continue with the discussion on a weekly basis, I expect and I look forward to all and sundry joining in the discussion. Thank you very much.